Around the world, a bunch of digital ID laws were just passed recently, and we gotta talk about it. Ultimately, this is not about left versus right, red versus blue, it's not about the fleeting arguments of the day or any political noise. It's bigger than that. It's about the technocratic dream. And party lines, well, they don't exist here. It's just a cold, technocratic agenda, loyal only to itself. At the heart of it is digital ID, a deceptively simple key to a world where every step is watched and every word is weighed against you. And no, I'm not being hyperbolic. It's the backbone of a global surveillance system. Check out this photo from the World Economic Forum website. They say you'll need this ID for healthcare, banking, travel, employment, voting, social media, pensions, taxes, and even to connect you to the smart cities of the future. Their big pitch is mostly convenience with a little bit of safety thrown in, but it comes with a steep price: your autonomy. Globalists describe it as, and I quote, an all-encompassing interoperable framework for all life situations. But that's really a lie by omission. It's really a trap that centralizes everything: your work, your travels, your financial accounts, your health records, your search history, your shopping history, every website you visit, and every connection you make online. I'm hoping that more people are starting to realize a digital identity isn't just an ID card or like a social security number. It's really a shadow you, a mosaic of your life under the prying eyes of governments and corporations. Post a meme they don't like or share just a little bit too much truth. Well, a single push of a button can flag you, silence you, or cut you off from jobs, services, even the internet itself. This right here is the enforcement mechanism for their entire new system. All of their most diabolical policies depend on it, from personal carbon limits to social credit scores. Yeah, they're building a system designed not just to monitor you, but to control you. A place where your privacy is erased, and abuse isn't just a risk, it's actually designed to be abused. It's all built on an obedience versus punishment spectrum. Obey, and you have access. Disobey, and you're locked out. You know, privacy is something that most people take for granted, but if they don't wake up soon, well then, welcome to the global surveillance state, where every move is cataloged and every little dissent is noted. Yeah, that connected world they promised you, well, it quickly becomes a prison without bars. So, all in all, if you can avoid digital ID, maybe, just maybe, you can avoid the dystopian nightmare. Let me just say this real quick. To those places that have already adopted digital IDs as a matter of law, I know things are looking pretty bleak right now, but don't give up, alright? Take the UK for an example. A petition against introducing these digital IDs reached an incredible 2.7 million signatures. That's massive pushback. Yeah, the government's response was essentially, yeah, well, we're doing it anyway. But don't even let that discourage you. The fact is, they face so much resistance that they're now trying to rebrand it under a different name. And who knows, if you keep pushing, maybe, instead of a rebrand, they might scrap it entirely. Which is exactly what they should do because this system is entirely incompatible with freedom and basic human rights. You know, it's just crazy to see the world falling into this trap after all this time. I've been talking about this stuff for over 5 years now. My first video on digital IDs came out in 2020. Yeah, that's right. From the Great Reset and Agenda 2030 to the pandemic response, health passes, and digital IDs. It's all a part of the same plan. So with that in mind, I was thinking, why don't we start at the very beginning and take a trip down memory lane? Because I believe this timeline proves a conspiracy. On top of that, I heard YouTube is relaxing some of their censorship, and well, we're gonna put that to the test tonight. Some of this stuff led to multiple suspensions for my channel in 2020. First, why don't we go through the timeline for Agenda 2030, just real quick. So if you don't know, the Club of Rome came out with the Limits to Growth in 1972, and it revolved around overpopulation in relation to resource scarcity. In that paper, they claimed that society would collapse by 2030 unless these problems were addressed. Now, if you watch my video on Bilderberg 2025, then you know they're still pushing this stuff. One of their solutions is what the Club of Rome calls voluntary population reduction. It's actually a main tenet of their Agenda 2030 initiative. And to do this, all the way back in the 1970s, they planted a seed within the public consciousness. They called the movement Zero Population Growth.
We had formed an organization called Zero Population Growth, and then Johnny took me on The Tonight Show.
Would you welcome Dr. Paul Ehrlich?
You have to get the death rate and birth rate in balance, and there's only two ways to do it. One is to bring the birth rate down, the other is to push the death rate up.
I did the show maybe 20 times. And we went from 6 chapters and 600 members to 600 chapters and 60,000 members.
We're starting in now. This is the first step.
The Bagleys belong to a growing number of young marrieds who favor ZPG, zero population growth.
How many children do you have?
2. I have 2 children.
Ehrlich's views on how to bring the birth rate down were concrete. Compulsion if voluntary methods fail. Creating a blacklist of people, companies, and organizations impeding population control in the U.S. Responsibility prizes for childless marriages. A tax on children. And a luxury tax on diapers and cribs.
The concerns about population became misanthropic. And it was taken with so much seriousness that Paul Ehrlich could recommend things like putting stuff in public water that would make people not as fertile.
Panic is not too strong a word to use for some of the advocates that I referred to as true believers.
It was a zeitgeist that was taking shape.
Attention, all citizens. Childbearing is herewith forbidden.
One of the things about zeitgeists is they have astonishing durability.
It appears that large families are on the way out, and ZPG may be possible.
The idea also took hold in the developing world, where governments like India's had already begun to embrace population control.
The core message of the book, population growth outstripping food supply, resonated quite a bit with India's elites, with the middle classes. They much preferred to believe that the poor were poor because of too many children, rather than being poor because of an unfair and unequal economic system.
If you start with that problem definition, then it's almost inevitable that there will be circumstances where governments and other actors will act in a way that is coercive.
In the mid-1970s, the Indian government began a controversial effort to encourage mass sterilization.
We do want to create an atmosphere in which people realize the importance of this program.
It led to abuses. Access to food aid and housing were sometimes used as coercion. Others weren't even given a choice.
More than 8 million sterilizations were performed, many forcibly. The people, in the words of one family planning expert, were treated like cattle.
Several days ago, crowds formed to protest being sterilized. The police opened fire and killed at least 50 of them.
Zero population growth is a tragic frame in the sense that it was assumed that there was no way out, that people would just go on reproducing until there really was a desperate circumstance in the world.
Ehrlich's message could be summed up in a dramatic prediction.
Sometime in the next 15 years, the end will come. And by the end, I mean an utter breakdown of the capacity of the planet to support humanity.
Yeah, this psyop started a long time ago, and we're just beginning to feel the consequences of it now. The consequences are a future that could be defined by population collapse and widespread automation to make up for it, which is exactly what they want for the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution.
If you forecast out the transformation that we're going to see across all societies because of AI, robotics, sensor technology, the speed in which this change is going to occur, I could argue in the developed countries, the big winners are countries that have shrinking populations. Okay, that's something that most people never talked about.
All right, so in the early 1970s, we had the limits to growth and the zero population growth movement. Well, in 1991, the Club of Rome released a sequel to The Limits to Growth. This was called The First Global Revolution. And on page 115, they described their plan to unite humanity with a common enemy. That common enemy is humanity itself, and the ploy is climate messaging. And I quote, "In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. All of these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it's only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy then is humanity itself." End of quote. Yeah, starting to see the vision. That came out in 1991. So those two books, The Limits to Growth and The First Global Revolution, led to Agenda 21, which in 1992, Nancy Pelosi signed us onto at the Earth Summit in Rio.
The Earth Summit Environmental Leadership Act, as this is known, presents us with an opportunity to follow up on the important work of the Earth Summit to develop its blueprint Agenda 21 for Global Environmental Action. HCON Res 353 outlines a comprehensive national strategy for sustainable development in accordance with the principles of Agenda 21 to be coordinated under the leadership of a specific office and at the direction of a high-level government official.
And so all of that transitioned into what we now know as Agenda 2030. But they were getting too much heat for that, so they rebranded in 2015. Yeah, these Sustainable Development Goals. Same plan. Alright, yeah, this stuff is tough to explain because it's all interconnected. But why don't we jump ahead and establish the World Economic Forum timeline with an article from Sociable. When I first came across this, all those many years ago, it really opened my eyes. It all starts at the 2014 Davos meeting. As far as I know, this is the first time the Great Reset was officially announced.
If you can, just raise your hand. If I can get a sense just looking around the room of who has a question, it'll let me sort of judge how we need to ration the remaining time. If you can tell me both your name and the news organization you represent.
What we want to do in Davos this year in this respect is to push the reset button. Let me explain. The world is much too much still caught in a crisis management mode. And we forget that we should take now into our hands and we should look for solutions for the really fundamental issues. We should look at our future in a much more constructive, in a much more strategic way. And that's what Davos is.
So yeah, check the date in the corner, 2014. Also in 2014, they published their agenda, entitled The Reshaping of the World. In 2015, they released another one, We Need to Press Restart on the Global Agenda. In 2016, How to Reboot the Global Economy. And in 2017, Our World Needs a Reset and How We Operate. Alright. So we established that they had a plan to reset the world long before the official health crisis popped up in 2020. And so let's run the dates for digital ID and see how everything lines up. Now, do you remember ID 2020? Well, guess what? They actually started talking about that in 2014 as well. But we have to jump ahead 2 years, because that's when the first big development happens. In 2016, ID 2020 announced their big plans for public-private partnerships. They formed an alliance between Microsoft, Accenture, Gavi, and the Rockefeller Foundation, which is interesting in of itself because Bill Gates has his fingerprints all over each and every one of those organizations. But there's another connection too, public-private partnerships. That economic system is the foundation of Klaus Schwab's global economic plan, stakeholder capitalism, which of course is blatant corporatism, merging the public sector, governments, with the private sector, corporations. Yeah, the only difference between fascism and the World Economic Forum vision is the nationalism. Alright, yeah, of course they don't want that. They think in global terms. They want global government. Anyway, the main takeaway is that they were already merging concepts right from the start. They knew exactly what they were doing. So, in that same year, 2016, ID 2020 announced the Freedom as a Service concept, which sounds dystopian, doesn't it? In 2017, ID 2020 said, and I quote, "By 2030, our goal is to enable access to digital identities for every person on the planet." Now, as it turns out, the ID 2020 Alliance members are also founding partners of the World Economic Forum Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which opened on March 24th, 2017. So yeah, they weaved in another concept into their grand design, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, automation, AI, robotics, all that stuff. In my opinion, they did this for two specific reasons. Number one, as I said, they want to reduce the population. And number two, their grand design demanded it. The Fourth Industrial Revolution, with its AI and automation, wasn't just progress. It was their plan to reshape the world after they broke it. I contend that they knew their economic reset, sparked by a convenient pandemic, would gut industries. 114 million jobs were wiped out in 2020 alone, and it left the job market in ruins. And as a remedy, they push automation hard, robotics, algorithms, and machines to replace you. But that's only half the game. You always get the carrot or the stick with these people. Enter universal basic income, the shiny carrot to keep you docile, and of course chained to a digital ID. If you want that monthly check, well then hand over your biometrics, your data, and your life. Step out of line and they'll cut you off. No bank account, no services, no survival. It's not really a choice. Disobey and you're erased. We're not there yet, alright? Universal basic income is still a couple steps down the line in their big plan, but it's still relevant. Anyway, this brings us to 2018, a year before the official outbreak. In September 2018, the World Economic Forum released an insight report in which they laid it out plain and simple, and I quote, "Digital identity determines what products, services, and what information we can access, or conversely, what is closed off to us," end of quote. Basically, it's going to connect to your entire life. Internet access, what media you can consume, underpinned by their censorship models, tied to your financial records, shopping history, medical health records, DMV records, everything. And if you don't comply, well then services will be closed off to you. Yeah, they openly claim that if you don't comply, they'll essentially lock you out of society. Great. You know, they even describe digital ID as some kind of virtual umbilical cord that continuously links each individual to their technological life in the smart cities of tomorrow. Alright. So as I said, it's tough to explain this in a coherent manner. So back in 2014, they announced a grand plan to reset the world, right? And over the years, the pieces were starting to fall into place. But deep down, they knew that no one was going to go along with this willingly. So ask yourself, how do you convince billions of people to hit pause on their lives while you dismantle and rebuild a global economic order? It's not going to happen by itself, that's for sure. And so what's the remedy? Well, a tried and true method, chaos. That's right, a global crisis, engineered, but sold as inevitable and perfectly timed. Yeah, here comes the simulations. In May 2018, the World Economic Forum partnered with Johns Hopkins to run Clade X, a fictitious pandemic exercise to test the world's readiness, and they concluded we weren't ready at all. Now, over a year later, in October 2019, the World Economic Forum once again teamed up with Johns Hopkins, but this time they also included the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for Event 201. And here's where it gets pretty crazy. The Event 201 scenario is eerily similar to what unfolded. They simulated a novel coronavirus that jumped from bats to pigs in Brazil, and then it exploded through an international airport. And here's a clip from their simulation.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. Experts agree, unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
The mission of the Pandemic Emergency Board is to provide recommendations to deal with the major global challenges arising in response to an unfolding pandemic. The board is comprised of highly experienced leaders from business, public health, and civil society.
Now, okay, so Event 201 kicked off on October 18th, 2019. Keep that date in the back of your mind. While all of this was going on, the US government was funding gain-of-function research on novel coronaviruses at a lab in Wuhan, China. That same day, October 18th, 2019, as Event 201 was underway in New York City. All the way across the world, the Wuhan military games were taking place as well. Over 100 different countries were represented at these military games. And Patient Zero, well, I believe they were in that crowd. Now, why do I think that? First of all, Event 201 simulated a novel coronavirus, and we ended up getting a novel coronavirus. On top of that, the sketchy research was happening in Wuhan. The military games were also in Wuhan. There were thousands of international visitors, all shaking hands and milling about. And then we got this, a US government report that was buried by the Biden administration for years, and it was finally released in 2025, just a few months ago actually. This report confirms that 7 American service members tested positive for COVID-like symptoms right after the Wuhan Games. And I believe, in my opinion, that this was ground zero, so to speak. It all lines up. But given everything I just laid out, that doesn't seem like a coincidence to me. That sounds, scripted. And of course, as we know, from there it kind of simmered for a while before snowballing into a full-blown crisis. By March 2020, the WHO declared a pandemic status for the entire world. And man, oh man, they were ready to tie everyone to a digital leash right away. I mean, there's no way that's a coincidence, right? They hold a simulation in which a coronavirus ravages the world. Ultimately, it upends governance structures and the global economy to boot. And then coincidentally, almost simultaneously, a coronavirus leaks from a lab. And their very detailed simulation that includes everything from government policy to media talking points and censorship practices play out in reality exactly as they talked about. Okay, sure. I mean, look at all the other predictions they come out with, all the predictive models. They're always way, way off, but this time they nailed it. Nah, don't believe it. It's too on point, For example, in the simulation, they planned out government lockdowns worldwide, the collapse of industries, a growing mistrust between citizens and governments, a greater adoption of biometric surveillance, social media censorship. They even talked about how they could create a narrative around misinformation, too. They discussed flooding communication channels with authoritative sources, the breakdown of international supply chains, mass unemployment, rioting in the streets, and building a two-tiered society based on, you guessed it, health passes. All of that played out over the next couple years. And with all of this running in the back of my mind at the time, there was always one quote that stuck out to me. This is from Klaus Schwab in 2020, and I quote, "The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world to create a healthier, more equitable, and more prosperous future." End of quote. I mean, what a coincidence. You wanted to reset the world, and wow, would you look at that? A pandemic popped off that offered you, and I quote, "the perfect opportunity to reset the world." What a coincidence indeed. So yeah, let's get back to the timeline. We gotta go back to 2018 for a second, because they were already trying to link digital IDs to pandemic responses before anyone had any idea this was coming, right? Wink wink. Anyway, this is from the ID 2020 Alliance Manifesto. And I quote, "Successful immunization and public health programs are viable avenues towards ensuring universal birth registrations and access to digital ID." End of quote. Ah yes, the cradle to grave initiative, from birth to death. They want their hooks in you. But let's keep peeling back the layers. In 2018, ID 2020 announced they're working with Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, to tie immunizations to digital ID, laying the groundwork for health passes as a permanent fixture in society. Keep in mind, this was supposedly well before any whisper of a health crisis too. Yeah, it's just a coincidence that years before the outbreak, the infrastructure for global tracking was already in development. Again, yeah, okay, sure. But that same year, 2018, the World Economic Forum declared all services and payment systems would be linked to digital ID as well. It would all be powered through blockchain technology, ensuring what they call full compliance of whole societies. Yeah, quite the ominous quote. And really, that's the death knell of freedom right there. Tie your identity to every action, your job, your groceries, your online posts, and then link it to a financial system that's wired to facial recognition and surveillance grids. And what's left? Well, you're left with a world where every move is tracked, every choice you make is judged, and if you step out of line, they can shut you off as easily as flipping a switch. Typically, it would be done through carbon limits and social credit scores. Those are the main controls. As I said earlier, it's all built on an obedience versus punishment spectrum. Alright, so now we're closing in on 2020, a year they flagged back in 2014, mind you. However, they didn't stop there. Their roadmap to the future has a few key years highlighted: 2020, 2025, 2027, 2030, 2035, and then they jump a bit to 2049. And that's to align with China's grand plan called China 2049. And finally, we land at 2050, which was supposed to be the beginning of their quote-unquote new global society. And if you pay attention, you'll notice their net zero plan follows the same roadmap as well, ending in 2050. Anyway, by 2020, the outbreak hits, and everything propels them forward to their favorite target year, 2030. You know, the SDGs, carbon pricing, personal carbon limits, the whole deal. In July 2020, the World Economic Forum, the Commons Project, and the Rockefeller Foundation rallied over 350 leaders from the corporate world and leaders from 52 different countries to design a common framework for digital ID. I mean, who doesn't love corporations crafting global governance systems in tandem with corrupt bureaucrats? Well, I don't. Anyway, the Commons Project morphed into the UN's Our Common Agenda, spanning over 45 countries with a leadership board featuring the US, China, Japan, South Africa, Jordan, and Ireland. And by February 2021, ID 2020 launched the Good Health Pass Collaborative, roping in heavyweights from the Rockefeller Foundation, IBM, MasterCard, and the US Chamber of Commerce. MasterCard was spearheading the plan to tie carbon limits to credit cards, actually. However, by June 7, 2021, it ballooned to over 125 corporations and institutions. And here's their pitch straight from the 2021 Good Health Pass statement. And I quote, "The largest immunization campaign in history is underway. Governments, employers, and others are considering the once unthinkable step of conditioning access to venues or services on vaccination status. Hashtag Health Pass." Yeah, we knew it, they knew it, we all knew it. Health passes weren't just for pandemics. It was becoming the gateway for complete control. Now, by late 2021, they finally admitted that digital IDs go way beyond health. It's the cornerstone of their new economy. And all the conspiracy theorists screamed in unison, "I told you so." But yeah, ID 2020 put it bluntly, and I quote, "Digital ID is the most critical component of the fourth industrial revolution, enabling the global digital economy, from e-passports to digital wallets, online banking to social media. It's all tethered to your identity." And then in August 2021, Meta, joined ID 2020, boasting that they'd shaped the future of digital identification. In fact, a 2019 white paper called Libra revealed that they've been working on this digital identity scheme for way longer, going back years, with digital identity being the core of their future vision. Yeah, it's always been about digital ID leading to digital control. That's it. Tie your identity to every transaction, every post, every move, and you're not just monitored, you're owned. Alright, so on the timeline, we're now at the tail end of the Biden years, and I'm sure you remember this, so we don't need to rehash it. A quick recap, maybe. Really, from 2021 onward, they pushed for normalization, getting digital IDs to become the backbone of a global censorship machine. Misinformation and disinformation panels popped up with the talking heads pounding the same narratives every night on cable news, and what's their solution? To tie your online accounts, every post, every like, every comment, to your real identity. You know, the World Economic Forum even released their top 5 problems facing the world, and every single year, they put misinformation and disinformation at the top. They put it ahead of wars and stuff. It's just crazy. I mean, they even flirted with the idea of creating a Ministry of Truth with this crazy lady right here. Meanwhile, all social media platforms blatantly violated the First Amendment and censored everyone who strayed from the establishment. The feds were telling them who to shadow ban, who to deplatform, and even got banks to quote-unquote de-bank people over online speech. Again, in the future, digital ID is how they enforce that stuff. It's the key to controlling what you see, say, or even think. So let's try to make sure that stuff never happens again, alright? But why don't we get into the recent developments? Remember the key dates for their roadmap to the future: 2020, 2025, 2030, 2035, 2049, and 2050. Well, it's 2025 right now. And again, I don't think it's a coincidence that we have a bunch of nations enacting digital ID laws right in line with their timeline. They're still on target. Let's talk about the UK first. So just last week, on September 26, Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced a new digital ID scheme dubbed the Brit Card that makes biometric digital IDs mandatory. And what's the pitch? Well, it's all about stopping illegal immigration.
And that is why today I am announcing this government will make a new free of charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this Parliament. Let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that.
Bosses who are prepared to hire people illegally are not asking them for their national insurance card. So what's the evidence? What makes you think they're suddenly going to ask them for a digital ID?
We need to be really clear. You must have ID, mandatory digital ID, in order to work, because we have to stop illegal work.
Ah, yeah, the classic playbook. Create the problem, exploit the problem, and then offer the solution that ultimately tightens the noose. I mean, they stoked the migrant crisis. They created this, made life unbearable for everyday citizens. And when the public finally demanded answers, out comes digital ID as the magic fix. Everybody saw this manipulation coming a mile away, predictable as ever. And from there, it only took a day or two for the government to admit this isn't just about migration checks or jobs. By late afternoon on announcement day, officials were already floating expansions. In time, they said. The mandatory biometric digital ID will roll out for renting a home, claiming benefits, opening a bank account, age verification for online services, enrolling kids in nurseries or schools, and even voting. They won't be mandatory right away, but it will be. This is not to help you. It's the gateway to a full-spectrum surveillance state where your biometrics, your photo, your fingerprints, your residency status are locked into a government app, shared with employers, landlords, banks, and who knows what else. One ID to rule them all, basically.
They have a problem in Europe. See if you can relate to this at all. They have a problem in England with people coming across, the water and just invading the country. And then they're taking all the jobs from, decent Brits, and they haven't stopped them. They're welcoming them in. They're not turning them away. They're not sending them back home or anything. But to solve the problem instead, they're just going to have everybody have a digital identity. That way, you'll know if they're a British citizen or not. Okay. There's an easier way to solve this. I don't know. You just stop the illegal immigration. You would send people back. You do that. You do that. No. Now, I want you to understand, and I don't know if I have time to get into this today, but this is the way progressivism works. They create the idea, and then they cause the problem that they can go back and say, we need to do this to solve this problem. Okay? So they've caused the problem of illegal immigration. They've caused the problem of all of these things happening on their streets. But don't worry, they've already designed the answer, and it's digital identity. Now, it was just voted in Switzerland, and Australia already has it. Okay, so let me just give you an idea of digital identity. This is from the World Economic Forum. This is how they are describing what digital identity will do, okay? It will give the users access. Now just think, what's left in your life? It will give you access to insurance, to healthcare treatment, to monitor your health devices. It will monitor your wearables, and it will be for care providers to demonstrate their qualifications. So you can look up, you can't do this now, I can't look up a doctor online and see if he's any good. No, I need digital ID to do that. But it'll also track all of my wearables and monitor all my health care and have access to my insurance and everything the doctors are doing for me. That's great. And all of that data goes right into a centralized data bank for the government. Now, what else does digital ID do? Well, financial services. You'll need digital ID to open bank accounts, carry out online financial transactions. Food and sustainability. For farmers and consumers, you can verify where the produce is coming from to enhance the value and traceability in supply chains. For travel and mobility, your digital ID will help you book trips. It will help you go through the border control between countries and regions. On humanitarian response, it will give you the access to services to demonstrate qualifications to work in a foreign country. E-commerce, you'll need your digital ID to be able to shop, to conduct business transactions, and have access to secure payments. On social platforms, your new digital identity will protect you for your social interactions, to access third-party services that rely on social media logins. Your e-government, that will allow you as a citizen to access and use services, to file taxes, to vote, and to collect benefits. With your telecommunications, it will help you, the user of digital ID, to own and use devices for service providers to monitor those devices and data on the network. And telecommunications also to monitor devices and sensors transmitting such data as energy usage, air quality, traffic congestion, all of those things. So you can see how helpful it's going to be. It will be in every aspect of your life. Now, the only thing that this leaves out is a digital currency. But digital ID lays all the framework. So then the government can say we have a digital ID, and it fits right in with your digital identity. And that's just going to track everything you spend every dime on. But because you have digital identity, it will also help you, spend your money, where you can spend it, where you can't spend it. It will have complete control and oversight of your entire life.
But wait, there's more. Just days later, on September 29th, Policing Minister Sarah Jones gave the green light for live facial recognition cameras to go out nationwide. And I quote, speaking at the Labour Party conference, she announced plans for national guidance on deploying the tech, building on successful trials in places like Croydon, where it's already nabbing suspects. This is Big Brother going full throttle, with cameras scanning faces in real time against watch lists that have ballooned to over 16,000 names in London alone, processing tens of thousands of scans per day, end of quote. And yeah, all of this is going to be linked straight to your digital ID. Your biometrics from the Brit card feed the system, so they don't just watch your movements, they track them, they predict them, and punish them. No matter where you go, no matter what you do, the grid has you in its sights. We're not heading to 1984, we're living it. This guy, Tony Blair, has been the biggest proponent of digital ID in the UK. He still goes to all the Davos meetings to talk about it every single year, and there's a lot of clips of him making the rounds, advocating for this kind of surveillance. He's been at it since at least 2020.
The unvaccinated. So both here at home, if we do have to adjust some of the freedoms because of the rising pressure from new variants, then it's important at least to ensure that those people who are vaccinated have the maximum freedom they can. And I think that could also be done for travel. If you're double vaccinated, it should be much easier to come in and out of the country. And indeed, around the world, I think you will find that countries start to distinguish between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. So in Europe, for example, they're going to allow you to travel freely within Europe if you're double vaccinated. You get proper proof of vaccination. I mean, actually, the NHS ex-people have done a good job in the NHS app, but we need to make that interoperable with other systems so that you can use this as proof of vaccination. You're facilitating it. So I think that there may well be situations in which people decide they don't want to make that distinction. But I think you're going to find in many settings, people do want to know if they're going into that setting that the people around them, if they're mixing in close quarters,
this whole
have been
argument
vaccinated.
reminds me of something going back for some years. This is ID cards by the back door, isn't it?
Look, I was then, I remain even more convinced today, particularly with biometric technology, the world will move to biometric ID, and they'll do it because in the end it's better for people. It's not about, look, the amount of information government's going to have on you is going to be minimal compared with what your local supermarket has on you. So this is a completely sensible way to go, and I think you will find right round the world that people move in this direction because it will facilitate the access to government services. And by the way, in some of the developing countries, the thing is about biometric ID. I mean, as you know, my view is the whole world's getting changed by technology. The big political debate we should be having, we're not really having it, is how do you master this technology and harness it for the public good? But in every single field of our work, our leisure, the way we interact with each other, technology is going to change everything. So, biometric ID is just one part of a much, much bigger picture. Face this situation in the future, we're going to have to create a global infrastructure to deal with future pandemics, because I think what has happened to us is probably part of a change that is going to be just normal life for the foreseeable.
But more recently, the Tony Blair Institute dropped a report just days before Starmer's announcement, urging mandatory digital IDs with the promises of €2 billion in savings.
We cannot continue with business as usual, and change is inevitable. This is where technology, like digital ID, becomes critical. My institute's own analysis shows that introducing this in the UK would save at least $2 billion a year, and likely more, by reducing losses to fraud, improving tax collection, and better targeting of state.
So I came across a rumor about Tony Blair. The rumor claimed that his son's company snagged a $100 billion government contract to build and monitor the whole digital ID scheme. Turns out that's not true. As far as I can tell, no such mega contract exists. But where there's smoke, there's fire. Tony Blair did in fact pocket $257 million from Larry Ellison, a tech titan who makes nearly €1 billion a year managing the UK government's tech infrastructure. And Tony Blair lobbied ministers last year to force them to use Ellison's company, and that positioned Oracle as the go-to for the database backbone of this surveillance system. You know, this reeks of the same old type of cronyism. It's the elite playbook, really. You put money into the think tank, you shape the policy, and then after, you cash in on the contracts. And that turns your dystopian nightmare into their payday. How nice is that?
Well, what's the importance of having that basic digital infrastructure in place? You know, cloud services, the data centers, digital identity. How important are these things to put in place so that the rest of the system works effectively?
Well, I think one of the most important things is not to put the digital infrastructure in place and make sure it is secure. And often it needs to be sovereign. So I think countries are very uncomfortable with keeping their data in other countries' data centers. So I think part of our essential infrastructure, just like airports obviously need to be in our country, or they're not terribly useful. Ports need to be in our country and they're not terribly useful. Data centers, because of the privacy requirements around the data, need to be in our countries or they're not terribly useful. They need to be in our countries, but they also need to be secure. And there are new technologies right now. This is the last year you will ever log on to an Oracle system with a password. Next, by the middle of this year, I'm quite certain you are Tony Blair. So how do I know? Well, I look at you, I hear your voice, I listen to the kind of questions you ask. I'm pretty sure you're not synthetically created in having this conversation. The security system, we have biometric logins. The computer recognizes you. It recognizes your voice. It might ask you to put your index finger on the return key. And we're absolutely certain it's you. There's no reason to enter a password. In fact, passwords are too easily stolen. Data centers and data is being taken hostage all over the world. The ransomware business is a very, very good business. It's getting bigger and better every year. We tend not to talk about it because the American FBI has a simple advice to someone whose data has been ransomed. Just pay them because there's nothing we can do about it.
The technology and the digital infrastructure, I just want to emphasize how important I think that is. Because in the end, you need the data. You need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been. Some of the vaccines that will come on down the line will be multiple. There'll be multiple shots. So you've got to have, for reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure. And many countries don't have that. In fact, most countries don't have that. An analysis on digital ID, which is an essential part of a modern digital infrastructure, could yield benefits not only for ease of interaction with government, but for the public finances. Though we have a little work of persuasion to do here, it has to be said.
Seems to me it's pretty obvious Tony Blair has a bit to do with it. And let's not forget his last failed ID card scheme was scrapped in 2010 at a cost of up to 20 billion. According to London School of Economics. And he seems to be totally obsessed with tagging and trapping us all because he's been at it for decades. COVID was the excuse 4 or 5 years ago. The excuse now is immigration.
But how can technology help in the field of migration? Migration is about bodies moving through space. And it's about borders, and it's about security issues at the borders.
Yeah, but it's also about, for example, I've advocated in the UK we should have a digital ID for every citizen. At least it allows you to know who should be here and who shouldn't be here. I think you can do much better surveillance now and tracking movements of people. And of course, there are other things that we need to do. We need to, for example, in the Sahel group of countries at the moment, in Africa, in the northern part of sub-Saharan Africa, we're going to have the next waves of migration coming if we don't help those countries. So it's not all about control for me. It's also about, I'm a passionate believer in helping the poorer nations of the world develop. I think it's in our interest too. So there's a range of things you need, and it's always going to be difficult. immigration will continue to be difficult.
Right.
But countries that are anti-immigrant have got a problem.
In fact, Tony Blair has been pushing for this kind of digital control for a long, long time. He was even advocating for predictive policing all the way back in 2006.
The information held on you and your children will be used to stop crimes being committed even before they've taken place.
Very nice. If we're not prepared to predict and intervene far more early, then there are children that are going to grow up in families that we know perfectly well are completely dysfunctional, and the kids a few years down the line are going to be a menace to society and actually a threat to themselves.
I'm interested in how early, because a lot of the evidence suggests you need to be getting in there while the child is still in nappies, frankly.
Or pre-birth even. Or pre-birth even. Or pre-birth even.
What exactly is digital ID? Why is it different from, let's say, your passport that has biometric data? What is different about digital ID to the IDs that we already have?
Well, a lot of those types of documents that you refer to that can be used as IDs are actually permits to do other things. So, for example, a driving license gives you permission to drive. A passport is something you use to for travel, but you don't have to have those things. The difference with the digital ID is that it exists solely to identify you and to hold information about you with the government. And Keir Starmer has said that it will be mandatory, so every single person in the country will have to have one. The other serious difference with this is that immediately this mandatory digital ID has been paired with serious restrictions on our liberty, which might give people a flavour of what's to come. So if you don't have Starmer's digital ID, you won't be able to work. And so naturally, the next questions that we ask are, what else won't you be able to do unless you have a digital ID? It seems very, very likely indeed that that will grow and grow probably into a sprawling surveillance system. If you are somebody that likes a big state and you see the role of government as not serving the public but managing, potentially even controlling the public, wanting to know where everyone is all the time, wanting to be able to issue permissions and revoke them, then a digital ID is really the perfect tool of control in a scenario like that. And I think there are governments around the world that have them for that reason, basically for population management. For example, in the government's press release on digital ID, they reference the digital ID scheme in India. I mean, that's absolutely insane. The Aadhaar scheme in India has led to numerous deaths, really serious negative impacts.
How death? Why deaths?
Because, for example, when people have been locked out of their biometric identifier, whether it's connectivity issues or access issues, they can't access essentials and food. The people who are living in poverty then can't access the things that they need.
All right, so why don't we talk about Larry Ellison? You know, Trump brought this dude out a while ago, along with other technocrats like Sam Altman, for some new initiative, a health initiative. They're going to monitor your health data. Yeah, no one should trust this guy. This is what I mean when I say there's no party lines here. Everybody is getting in bed with these corrupt technocrats. Anyway, as I said, through the Ellison Institute and Oracle, he funneled $257 million into Tony Blair's think tank. But he also lobbied UK ministers for prime access and positioned his company to manage the whole back end. Cloud storage, AI analysis, everything, the works. And his company is already migrating UK data to its servers, making Britain the perfect lab rat for their surveillance streams. But let's talk about Larry Ellison's plan for the US. His family empire is gobbling up media. His son just swallowed Paramount and CBS in an $8.4 billion deal that Larry Ellison bankrolled. And they're also trying to get Warner Brothers and Discovery next, so CNN and HBO. However, if you add in Larry Ellison's lead role in the US-backed TikTok takeover, well, now you got one guy with unprecedented sway over what, 170 million Americans see, hear, and scroll. That's way too much power. He's controlling the news, the feeds, and now the IDs to track it all. Yeah, this guy right here, Larry Ellison, is one of the main guys behind the digital ID dystopia, and Ellison himself preaches total surveillance as public safety. In a 2024 investor pitch, he unveiled his big blueprint.
The police will be on their best behavior. because we're constantly recording, watching and recording everything that's going on. Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. And it's unimpeachable. The cars have cameras on them. I think we have a squad car here someplace. But those kind of applications using AI, if we can use AI, and we're using AI to monitor the video. So if that altercation that occurred in Memphis, the chief of police would be immediately notified. It's not people that are looking at those cameras, it's AI that's looking at the camera. No, you can't do this. It would be like a shooting. That's going to be an event that's immediately, an alarm's going to go off, it's going to be, and we're going to have supervision. In other words, every police officer is going to be supervised at all times. And the supervision will, and if there's a problem, AI will report the problem and report it to the appropriate person, whether it's the sheriff or the chief or whomever we need to take control of the situation. We have, same thing. We have drones. If there's something going on in a shopping center, and I'll stop. A drone goes out there, get there way faster than a police car. There's no reason for, by the way, high-speed chases. You shouldn't have high-speed chases between cars. You just have a drone follow the car. I mean, it's very, very simple. And the new generation of autonomous drones. The police will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording, watching and recording everything that's going on. Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on.
Citizens will be on their best behavior, huh? Well, after giving it careful consideration, I have decided to become much, much worse. On top of all of that, he's also been making the news recently because he's doing a bunch of sketchy shit with Israel. He's going all in on helping them censor people. So, keep that in mind. Alright, let's get into the rest of the world. Just days after the UK digital ID law was revealed, Switzerland voted yes on digital IDs on September 28th with a razor-thin margin of 50.4%. So yeah, as far as I know, that ties digital ID to all banking services, digital wallets. But I bet that vote was rigged, by the way. However, then we have Canada. Canada is right behind everybody. They've been working on their own version for a couple years now. Mark Carney was actually in the UK as Starmer unveiled his big plans. And now Ottawa's announcing a national digital ID program that has the WEF fingerprints all over it. This is all coordinated. So let's jump to Australia. They passed their own version of this quite a while ago, but are now touting their quote-unquote gold standard program that's going to be used for pretty much everything.
The state government is about to launch a new form of digital ID that means you'll never have to hand over your personal details to anyone again. It will all be stored in the Service New South Wales app on your phone, which will prove you are who you say you are.
A radical plan to crack down on social media abuse is being considered by the federal government. For more, Nine's Oliver Haig joins us live in Adelaide. Ollie, how will it work?
Layla, good morning. Essentially, it will work the same as a passport. Australians forced to submit 100 points of identification like their driver's licence or passport when using social media accounts like Facebook and Twitter. Now, police would have access to those social media accounts, and it's all part of a crackdown on online abuse. Now, users could be liable for defamation suits or even criminal prosecution, and it's all part of a plan hoping to deter people from engaging in bad behaviour. Now, the recommendations were handed down by a federal parliamentary inquiry. They're reforms that are being considered by the Morrison government, with the chairman saying there is merit to remove the veil of being anonymous. Layla?
We've taken another step towards a cashless society. A big bank has confirmed customers in some locations can no longer withdraw money over the counter as branches continue to wind back services.
It's up there with the pub with no beer, the bank with no cash. ANZ has confirmed some branches no longer handle cash at the counter. Others are directing customers to smart ATMs for cash transactions.
The latest figures on ATMs shows the number of machines has more than halved from almost 14,000 back in 2017 to around 6,000 in the middle of last year.
For years, cash was king.
But not anymore. Hello there. I wondered if you had any change for a $50 note.
No, I don't have any cash.
Don't use cash anymore these days?
No, definitely not. No change at all.
Never?
Never. Not having cash is much more convenient.
For the first time since dollars and cents were introduced in the 1960s, Australia's cash supply is shrinking.
We are becoming fully digitalised. We're still producing cash out there, but we're just becoming more reliant on other ways to pay. And this is what you would expect. In fact, it's a trend that's long.
Exposure sites still, will they be put back in place to be listed once we are reopening? Because they're not at the moment.
We will be looking at what contact tracing looks like in the New World Order, in the New World Order, in the New World Order.
And that's just the way it is. We've got to accept that this is the New World Order. We've got to accept that this is the New World Order. We've got to accept that this is the New World Order.
And then we have Sweden, who upgraded their own as well, connecting their banking services to an eID. It's going to launch before the end of the year and will not only handle all payment systems, but also voting. But really, here's the kicker. Over 100 countries are still building out their digital ID programs, following the blueprint, from pilot programs to full rollouts. This is not organic. I mean, we also have India, of course, with their Aadhaar program, 1.3 billion people using it for all services.
Another place that India leads, but there's a lot more that all of you can be involved in driving forward, is this digital public infrastructure.
You know, my country was the first where they made cash illegal. 2016, digitalization was forced on the country. 8 o'clock in the evening announced midnight, cash was illegal, the big notes. And 70% of the economy crashed. This digitalization is now going all over the world, and there's a war on cash. They call it war on cash, because cash is merely a medium of exchange. It has no value in itself. It's just a promise. You read the dollar note, it says, I promise to pay the bearer. When it's digital, even a credit card, you know, you're giving rents to the global financial system. But when it's cryptocurrency in the hands of algorithms, in the hands of big tech, they will do what is happening in China. Create social credit system to decide a new caste system. And you might have also followed that while all this has been happening, the founder of the World Economic Forum did a book called The Great Reset on how to deal with the COVID crisis. And everything we're seeing unfold is part of that Great Reset. But an element of that Great Reset is you will own nothing. If ever there was a time for humanity to wake up, now is the time.
Estonia claims their version is going to be needed for 99% of services. And then we have China. Of course, we know about them.
Picture your life in a place where everything you do, what you buy, how you behave, is tracked. The government gives you a score, and the score is a measure of how trustworthy you are as a citizen and determines what you're allowed to do, like ever. Boarding a train, getting a mortgage, all goes back to this score. It's called social credit. It's actually happening in China. The system's eyes are in big data, artificial intelligence, and roughly 200 million surveillance cameras. She's a 752. That's her rating with Sesame Credit. You start with 1,000 points, and you can print out your report anytime. You lose points for things like jaywalking, littering, tossing cigarette butts, or spreading rumors. Cameras do a lot of the surveillance work, but it's pretty analog too, like posters that list the ways you can gain or lose points. And each night, local TV shows the surveillance highlights of the day. She's an information collector, a paid enforcer who walks around and writes down deeds about her neighbors. Like the man who carried a drunk person home. Things like this are good deeds, she said. But the farmer overheard swearing and being rude? Yeah, bad deeds. Her quota is 10 a month. She likes the work. Thinks the city's...
However, then we have South Korea, who tied their new digital ID to biometric surveillance. From healthcare to banking, they got you locked down. And then we have Singapore. Digital ID is used by 97% of citizens already. And then we have Denmark, who upgraded their version via public-private partnerships, banking, healthcare, taxes, you know the deal. We have Nigeria, who were really the first testbed for this cradle-to-grave initiative and are bragging about how they finally reached 100 million people on this program. Yeah, big tech has been in Africa using them as a testbed for all this stuff. Typical. We even have the United Arab Emirates, who are bragging about how they linked digital ID to facial recognition services. And then finally, we have the entire EU, who are now at the point of having a digital wallet tied to a digital identity, and it's becoming mandatory. It's kind of funny how the entire world is implementing digital IDs at once. It must be a coincidence, right?
Putting you in control of your information and providing a secure and convenient way to access online services.
There really is an almost global push towards getting the West and other countries signed up to a system of digital identification.
Ontario's digital IDs will be launching later this year.
Digital identity wallets, it's an European tool.
So what's being talked about is a digital ID.
Anda mesti ada dengar pasal identity digital national kan?
And we've seen this come out. This is the language of places like the World Economic Forum.
Digital identity is increasingly the cornerstone of how we engage in society.
There is obviously tremendous energy building around this concept of digital identity.
The overall principle of it is that it seeks to set up a system whereby Australians are offered the opportunity to be part of a digital framework.
Putting you in control of your information and providing a secure and convenient way to access online services.
Which you can then use to interact with business and with government.
My rates, my tax, my tolls, my healthcare, my welfare, my gas, my electricity, my bills, my banking, eventually virtually everything can be in my digital ID.
We are creating a framework whereby the government and this system becomes central to everything you do. Problem with that is framed in what we saw during COVID.
We're going to move to a situation where, to protect the health system, we're going to lock out people who are not vaccinated.
Obvious thing to move in the direction of digital ID.
At the moment, it's all voluntary. And we're told it's voluntary.
If you're an individual, you will not have to have one of these digital ID.
Once the framework's in place, it's not that difficult to amend bills to make it completely compulsory.
The government's position on COVID-19 vaccinations is that it is voluntary.
The vaccine mandate has kicked in.
This gives government the opportunity to turn you on or off, whether you are naughty or nice. Imagine needing to go to hospital and needing to use your Medicare, but not having, having been a holdout for digital ID.
Oh.
Well, perhaps you just don't go to hospital. And we might all laugh at that, but that's basically what we saw during COVID.
There are an untold number who are being denied these life-saving organ transplants because of their vaccination status.
Sheila Annette Lewis has died after she was refused an organ transplant because she refused the COVID vaccination.
And this is the framework we're setting up with this bill here. And it looks like the government are going to ram it through without debate. And the ramifications are huge. Imagine plugging this into a central bank digital currency and plugging it into data from surveillance. You give yourself a turnkey society potentially whereby people can just be cancelled. And we saw that in Canada with the truckers.
Banks have already started to freeze the accounts of people involved in the protests.
If your truck is being used in these protests, your corporate accounts will be frozen.
And if you want to look into the dystopian future, have a look at what China are doing, where people can be deducted from their bank account for jaywalking because the camera saw them, they have a digital ID and their WeChat bank account just gets deducted without them even doing anything. We're not that far off that. That is where these things potentially lead if we're not careful.
So why not join some of the millions of people already verifying their ID through Australia's digital ID system?
You know, earlier I mentioned the globalists pitch for it as something used for all life situations. And they weren't lying. It's the linchpin to the entire system. For example, digital ID for climate. They call it saving the planets, but it's really just about watching you. Governments from the EU to Australia are pushing systems to track your carbon footprint, every flight, every purchase, every kilowatt you use, tied to your ID. The World Economic Forum has floated climate refugee passports and new tax structures based on your quote-unquote environmental score. And that's already in discussion. Your choices become their data, your life a ledger for their judgment. And then we have digital ID for healthcare. Health passports born in the pandemic era are now a permanent fixture. The EU's digital COVID certificate paved the way, and countries like Canada and Singapore are testing broader health IDs that log vaccinations, medical visits, even mental health. It's sold as public safety. but it's all about mass compliance. That's it. And then we have digital ID for central bank digital currencies. You know, their new global economy. Yeah, cash is fading, replaced by digital currencies tied to your identity. And in the US, the UK, and the EU, they're piloting CBDCs that require verified digital IDs to gain access at all. Anonymity is dead. Every coffee, every donation, every cent you spend is recorded. Step out of line, and they can freeze your account with a keystroke, punishing dissent without a trial. Not good. And really, we have to hold Trump to this promise right here. We gotta do it.
And tonight I'm also making another promise to protect Americans from government tyranny. As your president, I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency. Do you know about that?
And then, of course, we have digital ID for cybersecurity. Cyber attacks are their excuse to demand secure internet access. The UK's Online Safety Act, which I've covered before, and Australia's e-safety codes mandate ID checks for thousands of websites, from social media to search engines. It's a passport to the internet, where your every click is tied to your name, building a profile that's ripe for exploitation.
The boundary between crazy but free speech versus misleading people in a dangerous way or inciting them is a very tough boundary. My case, some of it's even, kind of funny, like that, I'm using chips to track people, although because you're anonymous online, it can be worse. I do think over time, with things like deep fakes, most of the time you're online, you're going to want to be in an environment where the people are truly identified. That is, they're connected to a real world identity that you trust instead of just people saying whatever they want. I don't think in the future you'll want to get mail that comes from an anonymous source, because whatever you see there might be designed just to mislead you. And so the idea of provenance, who sent me this email, was that really them? We're going to have systems and behaviors that we're more aware of. Okay, who says that? Who created this?
But why? But why is there this sudden global sprint for digital ID? And that's because it's the golden key to everything, basically. They need it for Agenda 2030, and they need it for their new digital economy. Digital IDs and CBDCs are two sides of the same coin. Without digital ID, their digital finance system collapses. They need to know who you are, what's in your wallet, your biometrics, your every move, all mapped to a government ID. But yeah, it's all a part of a bigger global scheme to track everything you read, post, or click on, sold as a fix for bots, borders, and to silence dissent. Now, I don't think this is going to work out for them, but you gotta admit, their pitch is pretty clever. It's evil, but clever. In order to appeal to the right, they say it's a wall against illegal immigration. To appeal to the left, they say it's going to make your life easier, and it's a weapon against hate speech. But don't you fall for it. Whether it's the UK's Brit card, Australia's MyID, or the EU's digital wallet, the data flows to one interoperable grid. It might be, agnostic on paper, but it's centralized in practice. Man, what can I even say at this point? It's worse than I'm letting on, if you can believe it. Because once you get into some of the tech they want to implement along with this stuff in the future, well, the price of it isn't just your autonomy or freedom. The price might even end up being your humanity. And to all the people out there that have a negative social credit score in a system that hasn't even been implemented yet, well, cheers. I'm with you. Once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals, or you can use PayPal. As always, make sure you disobey those true fascistas, and yes, I do hope you have a good night.